It's a cash crop some say could have thousands of uses, but it's currently banned under federal law. Welcome to Talk of the Town, the forbidden crop. I'm your host, Mark Schreiner, and for the next half hour, we will be discussing the past, present, and future of hemp, from its previous use as an everyday material to its current outlaw status to the questions of what's next. Hemp and marijuana are both classified as Schedule I controlled substances, which, according to the Drug Enforcement Agency, means they have no proper uses, only abuses. But what if one had everyday applications that had nothing to do with getting high? Should all members of the cannabis family be banned, with growers and users criminally prosecuted? We'll take a closer look at these questions with a panel of experts. First, though, let's take a look back at the history of hemp use.
The first record I find of hemp being used is in China, 10,000 BC. It was common in all types of daily life in early China up to 300 BC. Eventually it made its way to the West. Hemp is the single most used plant, even in the United States history. Up until 1930, hemp was legal in the United States, and Kentucky, surprisingly, was our largest grower anywhere in the country.
A dense and shady crop, hemp tends to choke out weeds. Here's a Canada thistle that couldn't stand the competition. Dead as a dodo. Thus, hemp leaves the ground in good condition for the following crop.
In early America, hemp was required to be grown by law. 1600s, when the Puritans landed in Massachusetts, they came on ships that were rigged with hemp rope and hemp sails. About the same time that hemp became legal, marijuana, which is another form of hemp, was being introduced from Mexico. People were not able to separate the two plants from each other visually. The DEA had tried to ban all hemp in the country, period, because law enforcement wasn't able to tell the difference.
And stamp out this frightful assassin of our youth.
There were many rumors of why hemp became illegal. Was not all of them related to it being a harmful drug or a narcotic. Some people said that large producers of paper pulp and other chemicals, oil producers, thought that hemp would displace their product.
They wanted to demonize this plant to a degree that there would be no industrial competition for the paper mills, for the textile mills, for new synthetics that are being made with oil and petroleum products. All of those people were involved in colluding to create an atmosphere and create a misunderstanding of this plant. The entire debates in the Senate took about a minute and a half. No roll call, no record of who voted and why. World War II, it was definitely sold as being patriotic. This is your duty. If you're a farmer and you have available acreage, then you need to grow hemp for the war effort, and you need to grow hemp for victory. You can find propaganda films that are letting farmers know, hey, there's an exemption for the prohibition on hemp right now because the war effort needs these materials. DuPont and the plastic textiles and the nylon manufacturers were unable to create enough product to meet the demand, and because of that, the parachute that saved George Bush's life in World War II was made out of hemp.
We aim to use today's program to educate Floridians about an issue that is currently facing both lawmakers and the public by hearing from those on the cutting edge of the matter. Now, let's meet our panel of guests. First, Robert Clayton, owner of Florida's first hemp house in Tarpon Springs and one of the state's leading advocates of commercial hemp. Aubrey Arias, founder and CEO of one of the hemp industry's first investment funds, Greenleaf Joint Ventures. And Renee Petro, an activist and mother who urges lawmakers to take another look at cannabis policy. Now, as we move along, we're going to find out how each of you got involved in this field. But first, Aubrey, I understand that for you, hemp is kind of a family affair. Tell us a little bit about your history with the cannabis industry.
So my history actually started off a little bit negative. My father was one of the largest marijuana smugglers in West Coast history. Actually was on a special CNBC, Marijuana Inc. He had a 15-minute segment on there. He parlayed that kind of fame. He had done his time. He was in prison from the time I was 19 to 18. So that was a negative impact on my life. Fast forward into the future, my background's a little bit different. I went Air Force. I was a telecommunications engineer. Did that for 20 years. But now I've been working with my father in the consultancy aspect. I've created Greenleaf Joint Ventures to be more of an advocate for the entire industry.
And Renee, your story comes at it from more of the medicinal side of things, but it's also a more personal side, is it not?
It is. My son was diagnosed with a rare form of epilepsy in 2010, and he has failed all pharmaceutical medication. And 3 years ago, I found out about the cannabis plant and how this is used for medicine and how it could possibly stop my son's seizures.
Now, is it cannabis? Is it more of the marijuana base, or is it off the hemp base?
It's both.
It is both.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Robert, we'll get to your tie-in, particularly the hemp house, as we move along with the program. But first, let me ask you, what do you think that the history of hemp tells us about its potential future?
Well, you know, in 1830, hemp was the largest traded commodity in America. And it has lost its market since then. You know, it was the engine of the economy back then. You needed the power of the sales and so forth. And so everything was really built around hemp, and everybody did hemp. And until the cotton gin was invented, you wore hemp clothes because a hemp shirt was 50 cents and a cotton shirt was $100 or $200. So yeah, hemp was everybody's clothing. It was the tool that you used on the farm, and it was what you wore. And it was the three leading medicines of the 19th century were cannabis. And so it was a very important part of it was a strategic commodity. The navies of the world had to have hemp. When they say that the colonies had to grow hemp, that was so that they could get the commodities back home to the mother country. It didn't make any good to have a colony if you couldn't get the stuff home. So actually hemp was one of the reasons they could have a colony. You couldn't, if Christopher Columbus sailed on cotton sails, he would have discovered Morocco.
Let me ask you this, though. Do we have better alternatives now to hemp, you know, than we did in the past when it was more commonly used?
In some cases, yes, we do. I don't expect, for example, the rope market to come back to hemp, but we're finding many new uses all the time. This hempcrete was just virtually unknown, but they were doing it. It was found in a bridge abutment in the south of France in the 6th century. So that survived 1,000 years. And so hempcrete will survive. It will sequester carbon for 1,000 years if you want to leave it there. So yeah, there are a lot of things that it can do now.
Okay. Well, we'll continue discussing the applications in just a moment, but before that, why don't we take a look at what makes hemp such a unique plant?
My name is Greg Gerdeman. I'm assistant professor of biology at Eckerd College. I'm a neuroscientist, research pharmacologist, and I'm a cannabinoid researcher. For something that's used almost as widely as people use coffee, cannabis suffers an extraordinary stigma, a pernicious kind of stigma that influences research biases and media attention. There's been a long search to find out how cannabis works in the human body and brain, and the active chemical compounds isolated from cannabis are called cannabinoids. What's unique about the cannabinoids? On a certain level, the chemical structure is unlike what other plants are known to produce. It has a robust ability for natural and artificial selection, meaning traits can be selected. So-called hemp plants grow tall. They have strong, thick stalks that are really good for creating fiber products. This is what classically gets called sativas. And they tend to be very low or non-psychoactive at all, and that's related to very low THC. What's called cannabis indica are more shorter, bushier plants. They grow out rather than up. They're conditioned to growing on mountains and tend to have higher THC content. So hemp, less psychoactive, cannabis, marijuana, more so. We have a mutualistic relationship. Humankind has benefited from cannabis for these various reasons, as a medicine, as a sacrament, as a building material, and so on. Education is key because conceptions about cannabis are all over the map. I dare say misconceptions are the norm.
Misconceptions are the norm. I saw you all kind of shaking your heads yes when you heard that. Renee, we'll start with you. Have you found that that's something to be true in your experience?
The American people have been brainwashed for many, many years to think that this is something that will cause chaos in our country, that has no medicinal benefit, that we can't utilize it for a go green earth. And unfortunately, it takes devastation or tragedy in one's life to look at it a different way. So I have come to find out that the government owns 2 patents, one on cannabidiol, CBD, and one on THC. But yet they say that it has no medicinal benefit whatsoever. The fact of the matter is this is something that needs to be available for everything, for everyone. It's food for our body and it's food for our earth.
Well then, but again, let me just play devil's advocate for a moment. Couldn't it be said that legalized even hemp almost would pose a challenge to law enforcement's ability to control marijuana to some extent?
I don't believe so at all, because if you look at how industrial cannabis, there's nomenclature we should be using also, that's education. Cannabis has 3 primary uses: industrial uses, medicinal, and adult use. I don't think a lot of people like recreational because, again, we want to keep it out of the hands of children. Industrial use cannabis is grown completely different than medicinal or adult use cannabis. Adult use cannabis and medicinal cannabis, you want big bushy trees, plants, usually indoor grows. Industrial use, you want massive acreage, very close together planted, so they create these long, tall, skinny stalks so we can get the fibers from. You can also get seeds from the top, and the seeds, it's a perfect protein. The oils produced from it have all your essential fatty acids. So instead of using fish oils, which a lot of people are allergic to, you can actually use hemp oil. It's in the perfect, both the essential amino acids and fatty acids are in the perfect proportion for the human body. So you can argue, because of the history of hemp plant, I think we've actually created a symbiotic relationship with the plant to have a perfect protein and a perfect essential fatty acids, which the human body can't create, in both all in one plant. And it's grown completely different. So maybe as seedlings, they might look similar, but when you do it from an industrial perspective, you're growing it completely different. Should not be an issue for an adult law enforcement agent to make that differentiation.
Tell the difference.
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
And we will talk again about some of those applications. Robert, yeah, go ahead. Well, just the idea also, though, of, as we said, the idea of a gateway, drug.
Well, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police were invited to testify in Colorado, and they did come down, and they told the people that in 15 years they'd never had any problem. Now, why is that their police can do it and our police can't? I don't know, but that is really the issue, is that, as he was saying, an industrial crop goes from the farm to the factory, and then it comes out, and here's the product.
Yeah.
Now, is a dog going to mistake this when he's sniffing around lockers for marijuana? I don't think so.
Well, as we've been promising, we're going to continue the conversation, but we do want to talk about the ways that people are finding, kind of within current laws, to use hemp for a variety of purposes. One of the most groundbreaking applications is in the material hempcrete. Most of the exterior of this house is made out of the hemp-based concrete solution. Located in Tarpon Springs, Florida, it's believed to be the first hempcrete house in the state.
We come to the conclusion that you can make everything out of hemp but the kitchen sink. Nowadays, people are making kitchen sinks out of it.
From the outside, the hemp house does not look any different than conventional concrete homes, but the walls are made of something greener.
Not only can you make this material out of it that can be used and molded like plaster and concrete, but you can also then make press boards out of it, so you can have structural weight. You can use it for insulation, you can use it for the sealant around things, but you can make everything in your house out of hemp.
Hemp seeds are high in protein, in a form more easily digestible than the soybean, and in a nearly identical amount. As a result, hemp has been used to replace the soybean base in low-calorie products such as milk, butter, cheese, and salad oils.
Hemp is the highest plant omega-3 value and second only to fish oil. In terms of health benefits of the oil, there's all sorts of benefits that range from the skin to internal to hair to pretty much anything you can think of.
And this is only scratching the surface of hemp's potential.
Anything that can be produced from a petroleum product, a plastic or product that's made or derived from an oil base can be derived and made from hemp as well. In fact, a lot of times it's even stronger, more durable, and less expensive to do. Advocates estimate that there are as many as 50,000 industrial uses for hemp, from clothing to cars.
So the general public needs to learn a lot more about it, what it can do, what it can't do, and what it can do for you.
And now, Robert, your hemp house was mentioned briefly in that segment. Tell me a little bit about that and how it's come along.
Well, I guess I stumbled into it, you know, working on the internet, and I came across a lead to hempcrete, and I started reading into it more and more, and eventually I bought a book, and I said, well, okay, they're doing it in Europe, and I didn't know that they were doing them up in North Carolina. So I started looking at it, and I tried to find a architect that could do some work for me on it. And I had a hard time with that until I eventually found an architect, and then we found a builder, and we had trouble getting the building permit, but we finally got one in Tarpon Springs and got going with it. The hemp work itself went very well. It went very smoothly, building up the walls and so forth.
Now, you've been there how long now inside that house?
A year and a half, January of 14.
And you were telling me before that your utility bills, you see a lot.
I'm at least 30% down on the utility bills. I do no heating in the winter time, and I'm probably 30% less in the summertime on the air conditioning.
And also, I understand it has a very good effect carbon-wise.
It does absorb about 11 tons of carbon. My house did 11 tons of carbon dioxide. Now, the average house emits 75 tons, so I absorbed 11 of that, so we're at a net 64-ton positive, you know. But we're getting there. We're coming up with designs. We found that the slab was emitting more than that, so we're going to have to eliminate slabs and go with a wood structure type that can do that. So we will get down to a much lower carbon footprint as we do with advanced designs. We can do much better designs on the HVAC because now we know we don't need it. You know, I bought an expensive heat pump, don't need heat. So we can do a lot of improvements and refinements and get a better design. And
I mean, I've been out there, and the amazing thing is that if you drive down that street and you don't know what that house is made out of, you have no idea.
Well, that was a completely deliberate choice to do. We wanted it to look like every house in Florida.
Yeah.
We didn't want it to look like eeky freaky beer bottle houses and things like this. We wanted it to be a normal house, but you can make it look any way you want. If you want Tinkerbell's Castle, you can make Tinkerbell's Castle. It'll make any shape you want to make.
Sure. Aubrey, estimates from the Hemp Industries Association are that sales of hemp grocery and body care products in the U.S. are in the neighborhood of over $100 million a year, if not more. Well over.
600 million.
620 million.
Okay, but most of that hemp product is coming from?
The raw material has to be imported because as we were talking previously, you have to import all the raw material, then you can create the products. A lot of the times they get created, just like every other industry, maybe overseas, imported in. So yes,
Okay,
so
so
our
you-
farmers are not getting a piece of that.
Right. So how big an economic impact would it have for Florida? Would it have for the United States?
I expect the industrial hemp industry to be the largest piece of the cannabis industry over time. I think, as Bob was just mentioning, there's lots of lost art forms in creating products. And the amount of products that we could create, I think it's going to be a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Because if you look at the biofuel piece alone and bioplastics that are biodegradable, that can be made from hemp oil alone without getting into the seed or the fiber, those could be close to $1 trillion industry on their own, if you extrapolate it globally.
Now, it is legal to grow and then export from Canada, where a lot of this hemp is coming from. What is Canada seeing? Are they seeing demand for the product still there?
Absolutely. They're adding acreages by the thousands every year, because the more and more products, and keep this in mind, as you localize your infrastructure in manufacturing infrastructure and sourcing your product, your price points go down. So you can also, the more material you have, the more variations of products you can create. So because there's over 25,000 products that can be created from the hemp plant, anything from oil-based paint that's non-toxic to fiber clothing, hempcrete houses. So the more material we have available, the more creative our entrepreneurs in America are going to get. We are amazingly advanced society as far as innovation goes, right? America's still kind of one of the most innovative countries on the planet Earth. So once we get a product that we can do everything in education out there about what can be done with it, I think the industry is going to double, triple in size very rapidly every 2-3 years.
Robert, real quick, if we can, just touch on some of, at least as far as you've seen, some of the other applications and further applications for industrial hemp.
Well, we see a very big market in plastics. Right now, the world consumes 98 million tons of thermoset plastics. 48 million of that is in the transportation industry. And if just 1% of that went for a fiber reinforced plastic made of hemp, that would be 120,000 acres of hemp. So, I mean, that is big by hemp standards. So we see a great market there in plastics. There's a new fiber reinforced plastic. They call it long fiber injection molding. And that material is said to be stronger than the cast metals. So you can lift the hood of your car and the alternator would be made of this reinforced plastic instead of the metal that you see today. So that'll make cars lighter and more fuel efficient. When you use hemp fiber in reinforced plastics, for example, you get about 80% of the strength of carbon fiber for about 25% of the price. So you're probably going to be driving a hemp car before you drive a carbon fiber car, unless you're in Formula One.
You probably already are. I think BMW uses hemp fibers within its door frame already.
All of the European cars are required to do this. So BMW,
It's lighter and stronger.
Mercedes, Volvo, they're all doing it. And that's where there's one farmer, one processing plant, and all he does is make the fiber for the auto companies.
And you'd have no idea as a consumer.
Absolutely not. Yep.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
I don't even know if you're buying those cars here in America or what. Mercedes has a plant up in Alabama, and Alabama is looking at legalizing. BMW has a plant in South Carolina, and they're looking at legalizing and so forth. See, right now we couldn't provide those parts to those cars, so American companies can't make those parts. They have to bring those parts in from Europe just to put them in the car in Alabama. So we're losing out on the international market because we can't do these things. We see in chicken coops, for example, now this is a great one, the hemp core that you saw making my house, that's probably 95% of that material that they produce goes into animal bedding.
Okay.
Now in Denmark, they started putting them in chicken coops and they found that they had 0 salmonella, 0 campylobacter. Now in America, we have 24% of our chickens that we ship have salmonella in them. And the Food and Drug Administration says, well, there's nothing you can do about it. It's in the environment. Cook your food better. They're not telling you, well, there is something you can use, but we banned it.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a great thing for chicken producers, because when you do that, they don't have to use antibiotics now, because they're giving the chickens antibiotics to fight the salmonella. Okay, so now we can take the antibiotics out of the chicken. That saves that money for the processor. He gets a great bedding material that uses much less material. It composts better. Now, we make enough chicken poop, to feed 9.8 million acres of hemp. So you can recycle that back into the hemp farm, because hemp needs manure for its nourishment. There. So you get the closed circle. We have 1 million head of cattle in Florida, and they make 50 million pounds of manure. That's enough for 300,000 acres of hemp right there. So we can close that loop. You know, we've got problems in our water supply because we've got the nitrates going into the soil.
Sure.
So if we can use this stuff, we can get that out of the water, and that's a great boon for Florida.
Okay. Actually, just touched on a great point. When you grow hemp, especially when you compare it to other crops, it doesn't need pesticides or herbicides. It's naturally resistant. So it uses less water as well. So like crops that, cotton specifically is very water, pesticide and herbicide intensive. So all those get reduced with hemp crops.
Well, just a large number of applications there. We've heard the pros of legalizing hemp, and we've heard some of the cons. As we stated earlier, lawmakers around the country, including Florida, continue weighing those pros and cons, and whether hemp will be the miracle crop many of its supporters make it out to be, or a harmful step backwards that its opponents view it as, remains to be seen. With a surge of lobbying efforts from advocates like our guests today, we may get our answers soon. Thank you again to our panel, Robert Clayton, Aubrey Arias, and Renee Petro, for joining us. This has been Talk of the Town, The Forbidden Crop. Thank you for spending time with us. I'm Mark Schreiner. Goodbye.